In the midst of the conflict between Palestine and Israel, this is a short 3-paragraph letter written on November 2, 1972, by Arthur Balfour, the Foreign Secretary of Britain, to Walter and Lochschild, the headliners of a British enthusiasm community. The resulting dispute will be fought for the next 100 years. Perhaps even the British government did not know who is wrong between Israel and Palestine, who is right, what is the dispute between them, and what is the role of the British government in all this. Welcome again, viewers, to World Documentary Videos. This topic is one of the most controversial topics in the world, and I will try my best to stay neutral and only talk about facts and figures so that no people can't object. Before World War I, there was no conflict in Palestine. There was a large Muslim population here, but Jews and Christians lived happily with them. At that time, the entire area was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. If you look at it, the Ottoman Empire was spread over a large part of Europe, Northern Africa, and the Middle East, which is called the Ottoman Empire. There were some different leaders who were tired of the role of the Ottoman Empire. They wanted to do it, and to achieve this goal, they sneaked to Tibeti City, the enemy of the Ottoman Empire. A similar promise was made by the British to the Jews in Europe. From the beginning, the Jews have been a people who had no fixed abode in the world. That is, they had no country of their own, and wherever they lived, they were called a minority. The Jews in Europe were already facing a lot of problems. They were looked at with hatred, and in many places they were even killed. But why was this? Because of the religious conflict. They believed that it was Jews, because of which things in Europe did not tolerate Christians Jews. The movement called Zionism was started in 1896 by a passionate political activist named Theodor Herzl. If the Jews want to live a peaceful life, they have to make their own country in Palestine. Initially, many Jews were against this concept. As soon as they saw this movement turned into a political form, people from all over the world started turning to Palestine, funded by their own community. In other words, the Europeans also promised to give them the opportunity to create their own country in Palestine. In November 1977, Britain's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a letter to Walter Lochschild, the head of a British Jewish community, stating that the British government had decided that the Jews should form their own country in Palestine. It was written that the British government would give them full support for this work, and it was also written that it would not harm the Muslims already living here. They ended the 400-year reign of the Ottoman Empire by occupying Palestine. The question is what the British government wanted to get in return for giving Jews its own country. Later, there was a state here that could support them in the future by becoming their god. That's why they had promised a separate country from Jews. But in return, they had also taken this promise from Jews that after creating their own separate country, will not leave the side of the Britishers. It used to be that the country that won the war would take over the next country and rule over it until they became independent in World War I. In Palestine, they tried hard to build a Jewish colony there and succeeded in doing so, but the Arabs of Palestine who lived there already believed that Britain once told us about our independence. Not asked, in 199, Arthur Balfour wrote a memorandum stating that there was no need to ask Arabs already living in Palestine about their will. The law made was quite soft. The series of immigrants from all over the world started in Palestine. They built their own schools, opened factories, and also made a small army of their own at the will of the Britishers, which is called Hingana. And there was no option left that the Britishers are not doing anything for our freedom, but giving our land to others. For some years they tolerated it. But in 1939, the Arabs there started to raise their voice. But to raise their voice in front of the Britishers, it only meant treason. The Arabs of Palestine were severely punished for doing so. Many were arrested. Some leaders were expelled from Palestine and some was executed. But still the Arabs of Palestine did not end their strike. The British government created a Peel Commission to resolve the issue. This commission should divide Palestine into two parts. They refused to accept the white paper and started attacks on the British government throughout Palestine, in which many local Palestinians were also killed. These attacks continued for several months. But then something bigger happened that caught everyone's attention. World War II started in 1939, where this war took the lives of 6 million people around the world, while Hitler brutalized 6 million Europeans in his death camp. 66% of Jews living in Europe between 1941 and 1945 were killed by Hitler, because it was a very holy place, and secondly, the Jewish community was already settled there. They started to migrate to Palestine despite the immigration limit imposed by the British, but where the conditions were good in Palestine, there was still against the white paper. The Zionists were fighting against the British. After World War II, the British were tired and no longer had the courage to fight against the Zionists in Palestine. So in 1947 they decided to leave and expand their territory in Palestine. He put it in the neck of the United Nations that now you should find a solution to this problem. At that time, the number of Jews in Palestine was 30 million, while there were 1,100,000,000 Muslims and 1,100,000,000 Muslims. At that time, the Muslim population here was clearly double that of Jews, but the United Nations proposed to give 55% of the land to Jews in the partition plan of Palestine. In the United Nations General Assembly, this proposal received 72% votes, and it was finalized that Palestine 55% and Jews will get, while the United Nations has never given an explanation as to how only 30% Jews was given 55% land. At that time, India was also present in the UN Assembly, and India, the then KBM Jawaharlal Nehru, who voted against this decision, raised a lot of voices against the decision of the UN and said that the Indian ambassador of the UN was bribed by the Zioners to support their rights. I voted for this UN resolution, which was rejected by all the billion countries, and now Zionists and Palestinians came to the fore in Palestine and started attacking each other from both sides. But the military of Esli chose was a sufficient stone, so the Palestinians did not compete with them. In 1948, David Ben-Gurion announced the creation of the official state of Israel. This was the conflict between Israel and Palestine that has changed forms over the last 100 years and makes its presence felt. I made this topic big. Careful tried to cover only facts and figures without targeting any religion. What's your opinion about this topic? Let me know in comment section. See you in next great video.